So I'm going to read you some of this email. She says, specifically, I would like a show that covers good ways of thinking about the apparent negatives in life. By the way, all my Rules for Life shows these months are sponsored by an anonymous supporter who's given support for just generally Rules of Life shows. But the writer of this email also supported this show, so he is a partial sponsor as well. So covers good ways of thinking about the apparent negatives in life. What to think about when you look around and all you see, remember, are the instances of gross irrationality, injustice, unfulfilled potential in every field. And what to do when you feel that even if you think objectively about things, this will only emphasize their flaws, negatives. Similarly, how to answer the thought that the apparently negative state of things will never change by being advocated by you. That is, you won't have an impact on its change. When being a philosopher, public intellectual is not and never will be your passion, or even if it is, but you're not having an impact. Likewise, what to answer when your subconscious poses the question of, and this is a big deal, why bother? With regard to advocating for the ideal in any topic, whether it to be discussions on education, healthcare, which happen to be friends, which happens to be this particular friend is in that field, politics, government's role in life, etc. When it seems like all you bring on yourself is conflict and the accusation of dreaming of things that will never be, and that you're wasting your time if you're not spending your life trying to facilitate practical, step-by-step implementations of those ideals in reality. Also, if you could come up with easy-to-remember concretes, which emphasize the positives in life that one could think about when all seems black. Elaborate on the positives that come from choosing a stimulating career, pursuing rational hobbies, seeking out and committing to fully fulfilling relationship. In short, help answer the question, why bother going on? Which is a little different than the previous question. It's deeper, right? The first question was, why bother with regard to advocating for ideals? Why bother being an advocate? But this is, why bother going on? Which strikes me as almost a question of why bother to keep on living. So that's a question. It's more than setbacks. It's more about how to deal with an irrational world, how to live in an irrational world, in a world filled with rationality, how to stay motivated, how to stay engaged, and how to find purpose and, the big Jordan Peterson word, how to find meaning in life, so that the question of why bother living does not arise, or if it arises, there are easy answers for it. So I think this is an issue that many people are challenged by. For a variety of reasons, because, Ayn Rand paints this amazing picture of what life could be, of amazing heroes and heroines that we would all love to be and love to meet. She paints a picture of a world where justice is possible, getting what you truly deserve, people getting what you truly deserve, both the good and the bad. A world of reason and rationality, a world of infinite potential when it comes to the material and the spiritual values being produced and being consumed and available for your consumption. A world where reason rules. A world where you can get up in the morning with a smile on your face and everything around you is working like it should work. It is truly a beautiful image, and an image of a world that I think will one day exist, but it's not an image of the world as it exists today. As Ayn Rand articulated in every one of her novels, she depicts the world that exists today, and it's nothing like Galt's Gulch, or the world that one can imagine would be if one understands her philosophy fully. And of course, this has concrete implications in all of our lives. We meet constantly with irrational people, Irrational people that often control our lives in some way. Irrational bureaucrats, irrational regulators, irrational politicians who clearly have a wide impact on all of our lives. Irrational relatives, irrational friends, irrational doctors, irrational lawyers, irrational plumbers, just irrational people that we have to deal with in one way or another every single day in order for us to continue to live. We are unfortunately surrounded by this irrationality, more in some areas and maybe less in others, but it's true, it's there. People are just, at best, often just mediocre. There aren't that many good people in the world. And it's one thing to live in that world where you think, well, that's just the way it is. That's just the way it has to be. That's just the way it's always been. But when you read Ayn Rand, and when you have a vision, and when you're an idealist, and you know what is possible, it's tough to deal with it. And then, you might have an irrational boss, and your career might be stalled, or, I don't know, you might be an artist in the world in which we live in. There is not much of a market for great art, for, representational, romantic art. So you're never going to be able to be fully productive. You're not going to be able to make a living doing what you love doing. And then, of course, there's just the stuff in life that just happens, not because anybody's irrationality, but just because bad stuff happens. A loved one passes away, somebody you care about gets COVID, and suffers from it significantly. I mean, there's just a lot of bad stuff that can happen. You get sick, you struggle. It's life, in that sense, is not easy. There is a lot of challenges. There are a lot of roadblocks. There are a lot of setbacks. So how do you live in a world? How do you live as a rational being? How do you live in a world that is dominated by the irrational? And then on top of that, how do you deal with the day-to-day bad stuff that just happens, that is not in your control? So that's that little topic is what we're going to be talking about today. And again, I encourage you to ask questions about this. If you have particular experiences, if you have solutions, anything that comes to mind related to this, please feel free to share it on the Super Chat today. Our goal is to raise $600. So feel free to help us do that. Some people, somebody like Jordan Peterson's answer to this is, well, I mean, this is life. Life sucks. It's difficult. It's hard. But you have a moral obligation to suck it up. Primarily because your depression is causing other people to be depressed. Your depression is causing problems for other people. Focusing on the negative causes distress in the world, chaos in the world. So for the sake of others, for the sake of peace of mind, just make your bed, stand up straight, and deal with it. You might never be happy. But that's just life. Life is not about being happy. It's not a very helpful attitude. And at the end of the day, should not be a real motivator. The question really has to be, how do I live a good life in spite of all this? How do I achieve happiness in spite of all of this? Can I achieve happiness in spite of that? Is life worth living? And if so, for what? Given this kind of world, the state of the world around me. So I want to break this up into a number of different issues because, I want to deal with the kind of political issue everybody around me is socialist. I argue with them. It just ruins my relationship with them. What's the point of arguing with them? And I put on the news. I just get depressed. And it's just the political world is depressing. The political world is, and I'm not intellectual. I'm not a philosopher. This is not what I do. Should I keep speaking up? And if so, why? What's the point? So I've talked about this many times, and I think it's really, really, really important to put politics, these cultural political issues, I don't know, socialized healthcare, shouldn't, in the proper perspective. It's absolutely true that these issues affect your life. It's absolutely true that they are screwing with you, that they are making your life worse. It's also true that your advocacy against them is going to have a minimal impact on the world out there. And that often can create for you more strife and more conflict and more difficulty than it's worth it. And it's completely okay if you decide it's just not worth it for me. I'm going to step aside. I've said my piece, and I'm not going to engage with people on these issues. If they come up, I might say I disagree and walk away. But I'm not going to fight the world. It causes me too much stress, and too much strain, and too much emotional energy. It's just not worth it. That is fine. You shouldn't feel guilty about doing that. Every rules for life. I forgot to do it today. Every rules for life starts with the idea that you should be selfish. Think about your life, your health, your capacity to live the best life that you can. That is your primary responsibility. That is what you should always be focused on. And if it turns out they're getting in debates with your third cousin over socialized healthcare, just create strife, and you're not going to convince them, and it's just upsetting to you, then don't do it. And I've talked about this in the past. Don't feel obligated to have any relationship with a family member with which you don't get pleasure. You don't get any positive values. So if these arguments create stress, create problems, create issues, you're not under a moral obligation to be a crusader to change the world. If you're going to be one, great. But your crusading might amount to, supporting the Iran Book Show because he crusades for me, or sending money to the Ayn Rand Institute because they crusade for me, and then that's it, and you're done, and that's fine. This idea that you have a duty to fight for values that are unlikely to be achieved and cause you real distress and that are gaining you nothing of value right now, it's just not worth it. Now, there is this attitude, Jessica mentions this, that a quote from Ayn Rand that says, anyone who fights for the future lives in it today. And of course, that is true, but what does it mean to fight for the future? How is one fighting for the future? And what does it mean to live in it today? It means that you are whole, you know that you are pursuing your values, but that fighting doesn't have to be hand-to-hand combat. It doesn't have to be you engaging with people directly. Again, it can be something like supporting a group like the Ayn Rand Institute to promote your ideals, to fight for the future for you, to be your agent. Like if there's a war tomorrow, and an important war, a war that's worth volunteering for and fighting for, it doesn't mean everybody has to volunteer and fight. There are lots of ways in which you can support the cause of liberty and freedom. that is worth fighting for without actually being the boots on the ground. Only some people are qualified. Only some people should be boots on the ground. There are a lot of other ways, including supporting a war financially. So, to the extent that you want to engage in the debate and the discussion, do it. To the extent that you enjoy it, get pleasure, get satisfaction, feel like you're doing something, do it. But when you hit brick walls, walk away. There's no point in engaging on one-on-one conversations with people whose mind you will never change, whose position is anchored. There's certain relatives that try to get into arguments with me, and unless, I'm in the mood, sometimes I'm in the mood to argue, I just walk away. There's no point in engaging. There's no value to be gained. And yes, these political things are not going to change in your lifetime. Or in my lifetime anyway, I don't know how old you are. The politics are not going to get better anytime soon. There's no force in our political, philosophical landscape to suggest that things are going to get better anytime soon. That is the reality. It's not metaphysical because it's man-made, but it is the reality. It is fact. It would take a miracle, and we don't believe in miracles. So just accept it. You can't control it. You can have a small impact in a small area. I mean, I've talked about this, about people who obsess about politics. They constantly talk about politics. They worry about who just got elected president, and they obsess about what Congress is doing and this and that and every little thing. I mean, to some extent, I feed that, I guess, because I talk about a lot of those things on the show. But the big picture is that you can't make that the focus of your life unless that's your profession. You are not going to impact change in those realms. And the fact is that what's happening in those realms, you have to really think deeply about how it's going to impact your life and over what life's time span and what you can do in the meantime to shield yourself from the impact as much as you can. Troy, thank you. That is amazing. Troy has got us close to the goal before we've even kind of started. So that's fantastic. Thank you, Troy. Troy is a big supporter of these Iran Wool Show and generally of more positive shows. So it's great to see that so many of you really value these shows. So I don't watch television news. I do not watch television news. I try never to watch television news. Even in times of crisis, I try to avoid television news. Because I find the visual conveyance of news disturbing, upsetting, frustrating. I'm learning very little, and it just pisses me off. It makes me angry. It makes me mad. I don't need it in my life. Life's too short to get angry at constantly at Tucker Carlson or at whoever the CNN host or the MSNBC host or whoever is delivering the news. So I don't watch news. I found ways to collect information about what's going on in the world that has a far less negative impact on my life. So I stay away from the things that have a strong negative impact on. So every one of you can do that. You can figure out what are your triggers. Talking to family? Don't do it then. Watching television? News? Don't do it. Reading the newspaper? Don't do it. Find something that still gives you some access to the information you need in the world without upsetting yourself. And again, it's not like you can do anything about this. And this is, of course, the most important thing here in terms of the positive. Take your life, think about your life deeply, and focus your energies on the things that are in your control, on the parts of your life that you enjoy, that you love, that you gain pleasure from, whether it's friendships. And start friendships, find friends, get out there. Don't sit at home. Invest in those friendships. Travel to see your friends. Spend money to go see your friends. All the money you save on cutting off cable television, spend on your friends. If you, I don't know, find people you love to hang out with and hang out with them. So people you're not going to argue about. People who, whatever their politics are, I don't know, you enjoy watching operas together. Go watch operas together. Or operettas, as Elena Peikoff would have us do. Find hobbies that you like, that give you pleasure, that give you a sense of efficaciousness in the world, and you enjoy what you are doing. Stop obsessing about things you cannot control. Focus your mind on those things that you can. Think deeply about your career. Are you doing the best with it? Are you achieving the most with it? Are you heading in the right direction? Career is something you should be able to control. Not all of it, but that's part of the questions you should ask yourself. Have I hit a dead end? Do I have a rotten boss? Should I look for another job? Should I start my own company? There's so many things that are in your control that are going to be much more meaningful to your life than anything that happens out there in the world of politics. Do those.
And to begin with, I wonder if I can ask you to capsulize. I know this is difficult. Can I ask you to capsulize your philosophy? What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it Objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute. That man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it. And that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely a morality not based on faith.
On faith?
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason, a morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
All right. All right.
Now, may I define what my morality is?
All right.
Because this is merely an introduction. My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on Earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind, that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
May I?
All right, before we go on, reminder, please like the show. We've got 163 live listeners right now, 30 likes. That should be at least 100. I figure at least 100 of you actually like the show. Maybe there are like 60 of the Matthews out there who hate it. But at least the people who are liking it, you know, I want to see a thumbs up. There you go. Start liking it. I want to see that go to 100. All it takes is a click of a thing. Whether you're looking at this, and you know, the likes matter. It's not an issue of my ego. It's an issue of the algorithm. The more you like something, the more the algorithm likes it. So, you know, and if you don't like the show, give it a thumbs down. Let's see your actual views being reflected in the likes. But if you like it, don't just sit there. Help get the show promoted. Of course, you should also share, and you can support the show at JohnBrookShow.com/support, or on Patreon or Subscribestar or Locals, and show your support for the work, for the value hopefully you're receiving from this. And of course, don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, even if you just come here to troll, or even if you're here like Matthew to defend Marx, then you should subscribe, because that way you'll know when to show up. You'll know what shows are on, when they're on. You'll get notified, right? So, yes, like, share, subscribe, support. Like, share, subscribe, support. There you go. Easy. Do one or all of those, please.